Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And today we will be discussing a legendary band. And it's not just a band, it's a weird philosophy. They're not quite punk, but they're punk in their own way. They're trendsetters and trend breakers. They do whatever they want to do. They're honestly probably the most punk thing in a purity aspect, because even the punks didn't accept them in the beginning.
Yeah.
But if you've heard their songs, you would think that you would think that they're trying to be poppy on purpose, but it just happens to be that way, and they're just doing their own thing. And if you were a child of the 1990s and you watched Nickelodeon, you have heard one of their members on every single cartoon every single Nicktoon that you can imagine. Mm-hmm. This man has scored that. And Pee-wee's Playhouse. We're talking, of course, about Devo. We are not men. We are Devo. We are devolving. And if you listen to our episode on Idiocracy a few weeks ago, you know for a fact that we really are devolving. We are in the midst of a de-evolution as we speak. But before we get started, let me just run my quick gamut. Why Does This Exist? We're a podcast that describes the very weirdest in pop culture, whether it's a band that we're about to do, a movie like we just did, a cartoon comic strip like we did a couple of weeks ago with Calvin and Hobbes. Regardless of what it is, we're going to talk about it, and there's going to be a bunch of weird things that we have to say, or even a show like Tim and Eric Awesome Show, great job, like we did last week. You can find us on social media. Nobody cares about our YouTube channel. You could find us there, but nobody subscribes anyway. If you found us on YouTube, you found us by accident. Congratulations. Go about your business. And you could give us money on Patreon, patreon.com/whydoesthisexist. We have additional things out there, like articles that we're putting up for free all the time by our man Tony, like we did today on Jaws clones that do not have a shark in them. So you could take a look at that. There's some interesting ones like Grizzly and Piranha, no shark, but a piranha. And there's just a bunch of weird, also other things in there. So look out for that. Give us as little as $1 on Patreon, and you can join the Discord server. We'll let you into the room. You can see what we've got cooking, and you can, you can just hang out here, and we can bounce ideas off of each other. Maybe we'll let you in on a show if you've got a good one. And also, we will insult you on the air. We won't give a nice Patreon shout-out and say, thanks for the support, Geraldine. We will instead say something like, Geraldine, you're an idiot and we hate you. Geraldine is an 87-year-old man from Kansas City, Missouri. I made that up. There is no Geraldine. Geraldine is dead. Miss him, miss him, miss him, miss him, miss him. That's the news. Here's the weather. You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. So let's get on with the goddamn show. Explain to us about Devo, Dova, the de-evolution band, all of these things that they are. Please describe Devo in a nutshell for the lovely people in digital media device land.
Devo is really kind of a hard band to explain sound wise, because it's like they have like a kind of like a synth pop like sound, but also like punk at the same time. It's very strange. Um,
They don't
so
fit into any particular box. They
not
just fit
really.
in. They fit into. They like. They're like. They're like a Venn diagram. It's like if you had like if you did a Venn diagram of all of these different things, Devo would somehow be in the middle.
Yes. Yeah. So they were formed in the early 1970s by Kent State University art students Gerald Casale and Bob Lewis. They later met Mark Mothersbaugh, who we had mentioned before. And they decided to form Devo. They actually I think they like kind of like didn't really start off as Devo right away. They kind of like played around a little bit, and then the whole band, like the name of their band is like the whole concept of de-evolution, like we said before, with similar to Idiocracy basically.
Yep.
And they really, it was kind of like a joke at first, but then like it became like more serious because they were like, because of the Kent State massacre, which happened while they were all attending Kent State University.
Yeah,
Which, of course,
and
for people who don't
Daryl
know,
Cassell was friends with both of the people that were shot.
yeah. For those who don't know, the Kent State massacre was a basically there was a anti-war protest going on at Kent State University, and the National Guard was called in to control it. And the protest, I mean, there's various accounts of what actually happened. Some say that the protesters started throwing rocks or Molotov cocktails. Some say they weren't doing anything, that they were being peaceful. There's really no straight answer. But for whatever reason, the National Guardsmen decided to fire into the crowd, and they killed two people, I
Yeah,
believe.
I think two
Oh,
people.
no, kill four
Four,
and wounded nine
Jesus.
other people.
Okay, no, that's what it was. Gerald Cassell, he knew two of the four then.
Okay. Yeah, and there's actually a very famous photo of like a woman, one of the students kneeling over, one of the dead bodies, screaming, and it's like pretty much became synonymous with the Kent State massacre.
Wow.
And it was a huge like moment for like the counterculture movement. Like so many different songs were like written about you had like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and a number of other counterculture figures at the time write songs about it. And so this kind of inspired Devo as well, for them to like kind of like go forward with this de-evolution concept. So they're kind of like their earlier stuff was more like rock and roll oriented, whereas like their like 80s stuff became more kind of like synth pop a little bit.
Mhm.
Their first album, which was called Are We Not Men, We Are Devo.
That album actually took a longer time to produce than they thought that they were going to.
Yeah, so
Originally, David Bowie was supposed to produce the album, and they had gotten into like his schedule just had gotten really well, his schedule was just too complicated and he had to bow out, but they were talking to his lawyer, like I don't think that they had actually had any direct communications with David Bowie. I think they were doing everything through his lawyer, and then eventually the lawyer was like, listen, he doesn't have time to do this anymore.
yeah.
And they just decided, and they just said, okay, well, we have to just do this. And they did it, I think, in 6 weeks on a very small budget.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like they had already known what they were going to do for years on that album.
Yeah. And so the first album was very much more like more rock oriented album, like more punk influence, definitely, than their later albums. It was interesting because they also like, were using like electronic sound. They had synth. Mark Mothersbaugh was a keyboard player. So
Well, he
they
played
were
keyboards and just about anything else that he could get his hands
well,
on.
yeah. So they did have that synth sound even when they were more punk oriented. So they actually started to actually their first album came out and they actually got quite a large following from that, which was kind of rare at the time, but
Yeah.
they had
Also, kind of the opposite of what they were trying to do.
yeah, exactly, because they really didn't care about being famous or popular or anything. And I think they actually later on said, so of course Whip It is their most famous song that really put them on the map. And a lot of those old VH1 shows often listed Devo as a one-hit wonder because of Whip It. Even though they weren't really a one-hit wonder, they did have other hits. But Whip It was by far their biggest hit. It was in the top 10.
They never had anything that was close to the level of popularity that Whip It was.
Right. And I think they had later said that it kind of pissed them off that Whip It became so popular because it kind of went against what the whole point of the song was in the first place a little bit.
Well, people didn't understand what it was, and it turned into a joke.
Right.
So
Right.
that's what they were really pissed off about, because Whip It, it was supposed to be an anti-Reagan song,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a play off of something that he had said,
Right.
and because it was Whip It, you have to whip it, you whip it good, whip it fast, because of the term whip it, and people not understanding what they were referencing. A
Yeah.
lot of people thought that it was a dick joke, or
Yeah.
that it was just like a masturbatory joke, and so everyone was like, "Oh yeah, I just whipped it this morning," and they would just be and they would roll their eyes like, "Here's another moron who doesn't understand the song."
Yeah.
And everybody else just kind of fell in line with that, thinking that, oh, what a fun song, and where they're like, no, this is this is a political song. We're trying to make a statement with this,
Yeah.
and it flew over everyone's head.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and most people don't even know the political undertones of the song,
Yeah.
They were also one of the earliest bands to do music videos regularly, and were actually very much into music videos. And they had a lot.
Yeah.
It was big for them.
How many videos do they have, actually?
I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I just know that they had a number of them, because I think specifically one of the Casale brothers was very much into videography, and so would do the videos themselves. And I
Yeah.
think he also ended up directing music videos for a number of other artists as well, including, if I remember correctly, Foo Fighters and another a bunch of other really famous artists.
There's at least 9. There's at least 10 that they've done, but I'm sure they've done many, many more.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find all of their music videos that they've done. But yeah, anyway, it doesn't matter. There's a lot.
Yeah. And yeah, again, this was when they first started, it was before MTV really, and MTV came out shortly after their first album, but it was really, MTV kind of was the starting point of music videos, and there wasn't a lot of bands that did music videos before MTV. So Devo was definitely a big innovator in that regard. Also, this I didn't know, they actually became the backing band for Toni Basil, who's
Toni Basil?
So she did that song Mickey, the "Hey Mickey, you're so fine, you're so fine, you blow my mind, hey Mickey."
Okay.
That was so Devo actually played on that album. That was Devo playing with her singing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. It was I was like, holy crap! When I read that, I was like, I couldn't believe that. So that was another big thing in the '80s, is that they started to do more stuff like that, where they were either playing.
They also did a song. I think it's called "Let Me Tickle Your Fancy" by Jermaine Jackson. They did the backing. They were the backing band on that one too.
Yeah, so that's what they like really started to get into in the 80s is like producing and doing like backing band stuff for other artists, which was again another interesting thing that was not really common for bands at the time. Like you didn't see like established bands go and like be a backing band for somebody else, you know.
Yeah. Also,
Usually,
probably far more lucrative for them.
yes, well, I'm sure it was because session musicians always make like a shit ton of money, so I'm sure they were making like bank on that. And you know it's funny because usually it's like the opposite that happens. Usually like an artist will like join a band and kind of like, you know, put a band on the map, not like a band joining an artist, you know, to put them on the map. It's like it's really interesting how that happened, you know. Like you think of like, you know, Sammy Hagar. Like Sammy Hagar kind of had his own successful solo career and then he joined like Van Halen and did his own thing with Van Halen too, you know. It's like okay, that's one thing, you know, but they were both established bands. You know, usually it's not like an established band like finding like an unknown artist and then like being their backing band and you know and producing their album and making it like huge. You know, because that song Mickey was like, you know, was one of the biggest songs of the 80s. And if you listen to any kind of like 80s throwback radio, you're going to hear that song in rotation along with you know, Devo, like usually Whip It. They kind of had like the quintessential 80s sound, I think, Devo, because it was like a fusion of rock and like synth pop, you know, and that was like really kind of like a big part of the 80s sound was that like fusion of synth and rock. So, you know, they really never had as much mainstream success after they released Whip It. They did, you know, they had again some hits, but it wasn't like nearly the level of Whip It. But they continued throughout the 80s and 90s. They did take a hiatus in the mid 90s. And I think a big part of that is because all the members were kind of wanted to do their own things. I think Bob Casale ended up doing like I said, he wanted to do Gerald Casale. So it was one of the Casale brothers. Was the wrong one? It was Gerald. Ended up actually like directing music videos and commercials. So like I said, he did Foo Fighters, he did Soundgarden, Rush, and then of course we have Mark Mothersbaugh, who went on to be like one of the biggest composers of all kinds of music in the 90s. You know, from commercials to like shows, Nickelodeon shows like the Rugrats. He did the theme for the Rugrats.
Well, that's probably the show that he was most associated with. Is I mean, anything that you see Klasky Csupo on or Chupo, that Mark Mothersbaugh likely did the scoring for that program. Like just like Rugrats is obviously the main thing that he's like known for as far as like his show scorings. And the first movie that he scored was the Rugrats movie, which when they pitched it to him, they had no idea that he had never scored a movie before. So they didn't realize. So like he just said, "Yeah, I'll do it," and they didn't realize that that was such a bad idea to have someone who like doesn't know how to score an entire orchestra for a film.
Yeah.
Like to be in charge of it, but it ended up being okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did the Rugrats theme song because they had heard a solo album that he was doing. I think it was called Music for Insomniacs or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was using all sorts of like I don't know the instrument that he was using for the Rugrats thing, for the Rugrats song. I don't know the instrument that he was using, but he was working with that a lot.
Yeah.
And they heard that and they were like, "Oh, this would actually be great if you could do something like that." So what he did for that for the Rugrats theme song became basically the inverse of what he did on one of those.
Yeah.
And the rest is history, but he also has scored a bunch of movies. He's done a bunch of video games actually. Like he did The Sims. He's done Crash Bandicoot, Jak and Daxter. He did one of the Ratchet and Clank games too.
Yep. He also he scored the theme song of the Super Mario World television series.
Oh, that I didn't know.
Yeah, he did he did the theme song of Rocket Power. Wasn't him like so it was Mark Mothersbaugh, but it was him and these other guys, and they formed like a surf rock band, and that was the theme song to Rocket Power they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else has he done? He's also, I mean, he's done a crap ton of things, but
Yeah,
he
Felix the Cat,
his first thing was Pee-wee's Playhouse that he
yeah,
did.
he did Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Um,
He was also Chucky from Rugrats was designed based off of Mark Mothersbaugh. And if you
that's
look
funny.
at pictures of Mark Mothersbaugh, you could see that because he's got these giant, like thick rimmed glasses, the crazy
Yeah.
kind of like reddish hair, you know.
Yeah.
So he does look like a grown up Chucky Finster a lot.
Yeah, I guess. He also did Thor Ragnarok and a bunch of other movies that he's done. I was listening to just his solo music at the gym today while I was going for a run, and his style still translates over from what he did with Devo, where like he a lot of times when you're hearing like scores and compositions where there's a lot of layers, you usually hear a lot of the wacky instruments or like anything that's non-traditional. Really, you'll usually hear that in the background, or you'll hear it under layers, and the more traditional instruments will be more prominent.
Yes.
Where he takes a very opposite approach to that, and the first thing that you hear is always the non-traditional instruments that are in there, and they're always layered, and all the traditional instruments are layered underneath that. And I think it's kind of cool how he kind of deconstructs it in his compositions.
Yeah. You know what I noticed too is like his solo work is you could kind of like hear the Devo sound in it. You know, like it's got similar like this like similar like upbeat kind of like faster tempo, you know, like with a lot of heavy synths. You know, you could really see the artist reflected in the different things he did, and it's very similar to the guy who did the music for Spyro the Dragon, who was he was the drummer for the Police.
Yes.
And if you listen to a lot of his solo work and also the stuff that he did soundtrack wise, it all sounds very similar as well. So I think it's like kind of like, you know, these artists that have like this very signature sound, and it kind of translates throughout the different projects that they do. And that's very clear with Mark Mothersbaugh. He's also known for doing a lot of the Wes Anderson films. You know, Wes Anderson is a director who kind of makes these like artsy, kind of like interesting, weird comedy films, like The Royal Tenenbaums and The Life Aquatic with Steve.
He's got Asteroid City that's like in theaters now.
Yeah. So you know, Mark Mothersbaugh has been known to work with him on that and stuff. He's also was starred on the Aquabats Super Show because the Aquabats were heavily inspired by Devo, obviously.
Yeah, he also was like a character on Yo Gabba Gabba.
Yeah. Yes. And you know, it like has very clearly influenced so many different artists over the years. You know, I think a lot of like Devo's 80s sound kind of like it reminds me a lot of like 80s Weird Al. Like if you listen to like Dare to Be Stupid, that's like, and I think we spoke about this on the Weird Al episode, that like Dare to Be Stupid is basically a Devo song. Like, and Weird Al purposely did it that way, and I think even showed it to them. But yeah, you know, it just like very, very like unique sound that, you know, it really comes across in all the different things that he does.
When he met the other guys, it was interesting because he grew up. He didn't have a rough childhood, but like he was picked on a lot and he was bullied a lot. Mark Mothersbaugh.
Right.
Otherwise, I think his childhood was like mostly like fairly normal. He just was like the nerdy kid who got beat up all the time and everything. And also, I mean, a lot of the times it was because of his glasses, because he has really bad myopia and astigmatism, which he was legally blind. Yes, he was. And he didn't really do well in school until he had glasses because he had said, I think it was a Mark Maron podcast that he did a while ago, where he just said he one day he like finally saw color, and he
Yeah.
like really was he knew what the shapes actually were that he saw, and he could just draw all these things. And I think he couldn't really focus in school because he couldn't really see anything,
Yeah.
and he drew a tree one day, and his teacher was like, "You draw a tree better than I do," and he was like, "Okay, great, I want to be an artist." So
Yeah.
he just kind of followed in that direction because he was like, "Oh my God, I actually did something that people liked."
Yeah.
And in college, he there wasn't really a graffiti thing, so he would draw these. He got a hold of like the decals and like decal paper, so he would draw graffiti on the decal paper, and then he would print it on the decal paper, and he would peel it off, and he would slap it on something. So that was his graffiti basically. But he liked to draw these like weird astronauts, but they were potatoes,
Uh-huh.
and like it would just be these Spud Boy things, and he would just like put them around, and people would just say, "Hey, it's the Spud Boy guy" or whatever, or like. And I think when he met the Casal brothers, they were like, "Oh, you're the guy doing all that stuff? All right, like why? Like what's the big deal? Like why does it have to be a potato? Is there like something behind this?" And he was like, "No, I just thought it'd be fun to see a potato as an astronaut."
Yeah.
Like just a really like child like a really childlike mentality around it. And I think there's a lyric in one of the songs like I'm a spud boy looking for the right tomato or something like that. But if you look into Devo's lyrics as like it sounds really silly when you're listening to it, and then when you start to actually read them, you like it's a lot deeper when you really dive into it. It's not. I mean, that could be said for just about any piece of music, but
Yeah.
with Devo, it sounds like it's really fun and upbeat, like you said, and like lyrically, it sounds like it's just a bunch of random things that don't connect at all.
Yeah.
Like at least with most songs, there's a linear theme to the lyrics. Like you
Yeah.
can at least have an idea of what it's about. Where the Devo songs, it's kind of hidden,
Yeah.
and like you really have to read like between the lines or between several lines to really understand what is really going on in the song. And I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like there's and the whole point of Devo is that it's not a band, it's a philosophy.
Yes.
Um and um and Jerry Casale said this too, where they didn't where like a lot of bands viewed the bands as like the four members or the five members are like these are the people in the band, where Devo was the first, or well they weren't the first, but like they were the only band that they knew of that viewed it as a unit, and like that Devo itself was the bigger picture, and
Yeah.
that's why they did the music that they did. And also a lot of times with their ideas, they would come with their ideas and they would work instead of working on something that everyone liked, they would do something that everyone did not like, and they found a compromise in the middle of well, we all where nobody was happy. So they were like, okay, that's the song then, which is a really interesting approach to things.
Yeah. Um, Another, I think, one of their most, iconic things about Devo is also their choice of stage attire,
Yes.
which is usually consists of yellow jumpsuits with the energy domes, which are these red pyramid-shaped hats that they wear, that are made of plastic. They were actually designed by Mark Mothersbaugh and Jerry Casale, and they're meant to look like kind of like Aztec temples, or also the Waldviertel pyramid, which is a stone structure that is in the deep in the woods in Austria, which is like it's like a circular pyramid uh of this ringed pyramid that's like just in the woods somewhere. So it looks exactly like the Devo helmets. Um So, and you know, that became like their signature look. Like everyone associates Devo with those helmets, and it kind of also somewhat became like a look of the '80s. Like it became like kind of like synonymous with like the '80s. And I think the hilarious thing about it is that, you know, Mark Mothersbaugh kind of like has stated that they like purposely dress like that because they didn't want to look cool or groovy or like anything like that. They just want to look like stupid kind of, and like
Yeah.
he had commented that they basically made them look like Legos essentially. Like,
yeah, well, which is ironic because he later scored the Lego Movie.
Yes,
but the other thing was really like it was just funny because Devo was so counterculture the entire time, and they ended up becoming a part of the culture, which was they ended up doing the opposite of what they were trying to do.
Yeah, well, it's
almost by osmosis.
It's interesting because like they're such a counterculture band, but at the same time their sound, like especially for the '80s, was kind of like the mainstream sound. Yeah, you know, so it's like
it was it was the perfect thing for the time. Like that's honestly the best way that you could really describe a lot of the '80s sound.
Yeah, and it's funny because
listening to a Devo album,
so many counterculture bands like don't want to be the mainstream sound, but Devo like didn't care, and they were just like doing it because they liked it, and it's like just by doing that they became like the counterculture of the counterculture almost. It's like, you know, it's like a double whammy of counterculture kind of, because they were like, yeah, we just do what we want. We don't care what anybody says, either people on like the counterculture side or people in like the mainstream side. We just don't give a shit. We just do what we want and what we think sounds good.
Right. Well, also when they picked their uniforms that they were going to wear, it like a lot of the punk clubs, like they all wore their leather jackets and they like wore swastikas, like not because they were Nazis, but because it was just like it was to be loud and to like make a fuss really, and punk is really just about looking backwards on things and saying, well, we're gonna bring this back because it pisses you off. Like,
it's about bucking the mainstream and just going against the grain completely. That's like kind of like the essence of punk.
Right, where Devo is like kind of like what Devo was doing was they were just kind of looking ahead in a way, and they weren't using things from the past. They were just using things that just like that, like it was almost like a punk advancement where they were like, well, we're just gonna like we're we're just gonna do things that people have never seen before, or we're just gonna not look like you because the thing was, punk was trying to be like the look of punk is to be totally like go against the grain and be counterculture, but that look, even though the look is a nonconformity, it's a look of nonconformity, it's appearance of nonconformity, but when you go to a punk club and everyone's dressed the same way, everyone is now conforming.
Exactly.
So it's you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Yes.
The irony of the whole like punk and counterculture movement is that like everybody within that culture becomes conforming to that culture, and like the only way to truly be counterculture or nonconformist is to go against even the counterculture.
Yeah. So
which is kind of what Devo did.
Right. And the punks did not like that.
Yes.
Because they were like, what are you, some kind of like freak? Like, why are you doing this? Like, what do you like what's the point? Like, what's your agenda? Are you part of the establishment or not? Like, are you with us or against us? Like, what are you? And they're just like, we're just Devo. We just want to play our songs. And like when they first toured, they were they played CBGBs a lot in New York, and the Dead Boys, which was like one of like the big old school punk bands, they got into like fist fights with them. And then like after a while, they were like, after they held their own or whatever, the Dead Boys were like, okay, you guys are cool. Like it was a weird time. Like people were tested, I think, because, well, the fight had started really because the Devo song, like the "We Are Not Men, We Are Devo," they were pointing at the audience when they do "We Are Not Men" or "Are We Not?" Yeah, and and they happened to point at the lead singer from the Dead Boys, and he got offended because he was like, "Are you trying to say I'm not a man? Like, what is this?" And they were like, "No, we just point at people." And they were like, "Yeah, okay, well, maybe don't point this way." And then of course that became, "Oh, well, now we're gonna point at you." So it became bigger than it was, and then they ended up getting friendly after the scuffle, as so what usually happens for some reason. It's a weird primitive animal thing that we just have as humans. I don't know why. If you're an alien listening from wherever it is that you are, that just know that, but you probably already did. But I just think that was just really interesting on like just the wardrobe, how even the punks, like how it was such a punk wardrobe, and even the punks didn't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. They really went against the grain in every way they could, possibly, basically.
Yeah. And despite their best efforts, they became very successful.
Yeah. Which is, hilarious, and maybe like, says something about like society in general, that like people want that, people that don't care,
Yeah, well, because the things that stick out tend to get the most attention because it's this weird thing. Like even
it's
if
almost
you're
like a reverse psychology kind of thing. Like, people purposely go for the stuff that's like off-putting, or like, like be like against like the norm because like,
yeah.
I think it's like you could say it's a big reason why friggin' Donald Trump won the election in 2016 is because he was such a friggin' like crazy candidate that said shit that no other political candidate in history had said. Basically like when they asked him like, oh, like, or they accused him of like, oh, you exploit the system to benefit yourself. And he's basically like, yeah, of course I do. And so do all your donors. Like, it was like if no politician had ever spoken like that before. And people liked it just because.
I mean, he also wasn't even a politician.
Well, exactly.
Which was even more baffling. And people were drawn to that because it was something different.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not that was for better or worse is up to you to decide. We try not to lean one way or the other politically, whatever it is whatever you think, however good or bad this affected things, whatever you think, I guess that's the right answer for you.
Yeah.
Like trying to say that in the least divisive way, whatever you think.
Well, yeah, and I'm not
whatever
even
you
like
think was the thing. Is a thing.
Just like I'm not even like trying to take a political stand. I'm just explaining like that's like a big reason why Donald Trump was so popular is because he went against like what the norm was, I guess.
No, I understand.
And it's just like
I'm
really just a psychological thing that you see in like people in society, is that like, people tend to like go with things that against the norm, even though they like pretend to not to want to do that. It's very strange.
Yes, I've seen this. Well, I mean, we've all seen this plenty of times in our life where someone says, "Oh, well, I don't even like that," but then they're doing exactly what they said that they don't like doing.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes no sense to me. Or like, yeah, I'm gonna stop doing this, and they just never do.
Yeah,
and it's because they either it's because they deep down they like the attention that they get for it, so they will continue to do it.
I think it's like,
it's a weird psychological quirk that we have.
We have this pressure from like society to conform to what is like considered normal, and humanity at like, are very much like free will is our like one of our most important like traits. And I think exercising free will is part of that, because society wants everybody to conform a certain way. Part of exercising free will is to go against that. And like, that's, kind of what Devo did a little bit. They like, were just like, they went against all expectations of them.
Yes. I mean, and also the other thing is you're raised to be normal. You're raised to like to go through this like this regular process of life, and everybody tells you, oh, well, these are the steps you have to take if you want to be a normal person, you want to have a normal life. And then as you get older, you realize everybody's weird.
Yeah.
In their own way, everybody is weird, and
I think you just learn to care less too about what other people think the older they get.
Well, that too. You do learn to care less, and as you discover yourself, you realize I'm a weird person. Like
Yeah.
I I don't need to do any of these things. And then as you meet other people who like from different walks of life who got to where they are through like very different means and they had different backgrounds and everything and they have different opinions on things, you realize there really is no such thing as normal. It's just
Yeah.
this it's whatever designated path the establishment has set. And if you look into if you look back into like various time periods, that all of that has just constantly changed over time, and it's evolved or devolved depending on what your thoughts on it are. Um, but it's just really interesting because like the conformity goalpost is always changing, and then as you get older, you realize there is no goalpost, and
Doesn't make a difference.
no, it really doesn't. It's
All
just
you
a
have to
big
do is learn to live your life the way you want to live it.
exactly. It's your life. It's a show about nothing.
Yeah.
What was the first time that you were that you experienced Devo?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think my first experience with Devo was Whip It because that's pretty much everybody's first experience with Devo.
Have you ever seen them?
No, I've never seen them.
Okay, no, I've never seen them either.
I've never been really huge into Devo. I actually like listening to them for the podcast is like the most I've ever really listened to them. I remember their cover of "I Can't Get No Satisfaction" by the Stones is
I love that cover.
Yeah, and it's featured prominently in the movie Casino towards the end.
Yeah.
So that was always a big thing for me too, because Casino is one of my favorite movies. So I've seen it a million times. So I always heard that version of Devo. And I think
I've never seen that all the way through.
Oh, it's such a great movie.
I know, it's on my list.
And I think Whip It is also in that movie too. So it's like that was another thing that kind of like I heard, where I got exposed to Devo from that movie. And then, of course, Mark Mothersbaugh, I've been, exposed to basically my whole life because of, Rugrats and Rocket Power and Crash Bandicoot and like all the other shit that he's done, on the side, So
I think I started noticing his name when McDonald's came out with the Wacky Adventure of Ronald McDonald's videos.
Oh yeah.
And I started really because like Kolaski Chupo was the studio that did all of those. And I think that was the first time where I started noticing the name Mark Mothersbaugh. And then like slowly as I kept rewatching and watching Nicktoons again, I started seeing the name a little bit more. But I had never known that I'd never known who he was. I didn't know anything about Devo until college, really.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that I had ever I'm sure I had heard Whip It at points in time on the radio, but not knowing what it was or like who did it and not caring because I don't think I cared one way or the other about the song. And I think maybe the only time that I had actually heard any Devo on purpose was I had listened to the Demolition Hammer album Time Bomb for the first time, which at that point I was pretty much only listening to thrash metal and death metal, so anything that wasn't extremely fast or aggressive, I didn't like it. Because I was pretty close-minded musically. I thought that I was open-minded, but I really wasn't. And I had heard I had probably heard the Mongoloid cover, but I had heard the Mongoloid cover by Demolition Hammer, and I was like, well, this song is really out of place on an album that is not actually as bad as people like have said that it is. It's just not as good as the other two albums, but that's not their fault. Like I was talking about this with a friend the other day, and I think the issue with thrash metal when like it got into like the mid '90s when like they tried to pivot too hard into the groove metal stuff, and it just wasn't. It was like more than it needed. But like Overkill was really the only band that was like just enough into the groove metal because they leaned more into the Sabbath stuff. But that's another story for another day. The first time that I really was exposed to Devo and I really like listened to it was I was in college and I was maybe a couple of days into dorming at SUNY Oswego, and these two guys down the hall that would be well next door to me that would end up being like my best friends in that university, and I still keep in touch with them a little bit. One of them more than others, but I actually got a call. I got to give them those fellas a call and see how they're doing. But one of them actually played. One of them actually did the vocals on a Zamboni song that we did that ended up being the song that our most successful song by accident
Yeah.
by doing a wacky Bill Cosby impression over our music. And the other guy actually mixed and recorded that. And
Yeah.
he mixed a couple of our EPs and things. The names of these individuals have been excluded to protect the innocent.
Yeah.
But but he put on Devo. I think we were playing Minecraft or something when like Minecraft was beta. So you could guess how old that how long ago that was when this was when Notch was still running things.
Yeah.
And we were playing Minecraft and he was like, "Oh, do you like Devo?" Because he had like a bunch of like vinyl records that he brought over, and he was like, "Do you like Devo?" And I was like, "I really don't like Devo all that much." And he's like, "You don't like Devo?" And I was like, "I mean, honestly, I never really listened to them. I probably heard a couple other songs every once, like, but I never really got into it." And he was like, "Okay, we're just gonna put on Devo then." And yeah, so he did. I think he put on the first album, and like after a little while, he was just like, "So, do you like it?" And I was like, "It's okay." And we kept going, and he put on like probably the first four albums, like over the course of the night, but like maybe like halfway through the second or third album, I was like, this is pretty good." And he was like, "Oh, does this mean you like Devo?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess I like Devo." He
Yeah.
was like, "Hooray, you like Devo? Let's go. It's 10 o'clock and it's wing night. Let's go. Let's go to the cafeteria and celebrate." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay." And I think he may or may not have brought an accordion with him to the cafeteria to play accordion as we ate wings. Yeah, he would bring he was very eclectic with the instruments. He would just bring the accordion to things. Sometimes it was a little too much.
Yeah.
But he would bring an accordion, or he would bring a synclavier, or just he would just bring odd things, or like a or like a jaw harp. Um, which jaw harps are fun if you've ever played them. They also call them Jews harps.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it. Sometimes we would do harmonica nights just because, but it was like and not in the cafeteria. Just like we would just play harmonica for like moments at a time, even though none of us really had an idea of what we were doing. But I mean, he knew more theory, so he had more of an idea. But I was just like, okay, I think this sounds good.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had very interesting times listening to Devo and playing Minecraft and
Yeah.
just hanging out. It was a unique experience, but I guess I guess I was introduced to Devo in the most Devo way.
Yeah. I also want to point out just to like link to one of our older episodes, Mark Mothersbaugh also composed the music for Tiger King.
Oh, did he?
Yes, he did.
Wow, what an odd credit to have.
Yeah. So there you go. He's like extremely, extremely prolific. Like he's done so much.
Oh yeah.
He did Cocaine Bear.
I did not. I didn't see that yet. Actually,
Yeah.
I heard it was like not bad. Actually,
Yeah, I heard it was interesting.
yeah. I mean, I would watch it. I think it was just one of those movies where I was like, I'm not going to go to the movies and pay for this, but I might. But like, I'll watch it on TV at some point.
Yeah, one of those movies just to like turn your brain off and like fucking just see what happens, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, supposedly that's based on a true story.
Yeah, yes, it is, but I don't think how true the movie stays to it. I don't think it's very accurate, but
well, it's based,
right.
so
based loosely on a true story,
Yeah.
But I've been told from people that have seen it that it's basically like a slasher movie, except the slasher is a bear.
Okay.
So there you go.
Kind of like Grizzly, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he did he's done a crap ton of things. Look at this.
Yeah. Yeah.
He Yeah, well, Mark Mothersbaugh is interesting in the way where he did Happy Gilmore.
Yeah.
Huh.
He has well over 200 credits.
Jesus
of
Christ.
soundtrack credits. So
Wow. Yeah. He's one of those guys where like you've heard him somehow, similar
Yes.
to Danny DeVito, not Danny DeVito, similar to Danny Elfman.
Yes.
Wrong Danny. He's been on everything from like the 80s through now, and you don't know that you've heard his stuff before, but you have.
Yes.
But yeah, Devo is just it's a very interesting band, and it's just crazy that this is just what this came out of, just Akron, Ohio, where it was just like a bunch of people who were just trying to like be anti-art, anti-establishment, anti-music, anti-everything. Whatever they wanted to do was specifically to not be any part of it. Like whatever it was, they had every intention of going the other way. And like again, like I said, if you look into the lyrics and you really skip around in the lines lyrically, and like you take a look at the tongue-in-cheek social theories that they have in there, like this is really the whole thing is it's social commentary, and it's a philosophy, the music, and it's just really interesting.
Yeah.
But also the fact that they view the music as like they don't view Devo as a band, they view Devo as a piece of art, and they're just constantly composing, they're just constantly creating this work of art. It's like it's really interesting, and also like it gives them so much more freedom to explore everything.
Yeah.
So I think I think the musical philosophy behind it is probably the best thing going that it is for Devo, because it gets rid of any traditional barriers that you would have when you set out to make music, because normally you have you have whatever idea you have for whatever type of music you want to make, and sometimes you paint yourself into a corner when you decide what kind of music you want to make. Like you might say, "Oh, I want to do," if you want to be just speaking from experience, if you want to be a thrash metal band, you now have decided that you have to play thrash metal, and you're not your limitations to explore are you're really restricted into what you can do if you're as a thrash metal artist. Like if you want to slow things down, you really can't. Or if you want to try, or if you want to get experimental, you really can't use certain things. If you want to use certain instruments, that might not be palatable for your audience. Where Devo, that philosophy is just thrown out the window, and it's just all experimental stuff. And it's just like it isn't where Devo a band and this is what we do. It's like we're just whatever the music we make is Devo.
Yeah.
Where I think that's the way that it should be, just from an artist perspective. Like the less rules you have, the better that your art becomes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love that philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really probably the way it should be. To not restrict yourself or limit yourself to a certain thing, because that's really how it things flourish.
Right. And also, you shouldn't try to make music for people. You should make the music for you.
Yeah, much
And
like
then
Frank
and
Zappa.
then Yes, and the others will follow
Yes.
into liking whatever it is that you do because like it isn't even attracting like-minded people, it's just attracting people who appreciate whatever it is that you're making. And that's really that's the importance of music. And I don't think enough people think about that. And
Yeah.
I know I didn't think about that for a very long time. And I think just just to maybe just to maybe pull back the curtain a little bit, you and I have been discussing for a long time of doing a certain project together that
Yeah.
is just probably it'll definitely be the weirdest thing that you and I have ever done, and it's not anything really. It's pretty unconventional, I would think.
Yeah.
Um, and I like that idea, and also there's another idea that I've been kicking around just as a thing that I would like to do on my own. It kind of continues something that I had tried in the last musical project that I did, and I would like to do something like that again. Um, and I think I'm just gonna go for it and just see what happens.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And just assuming that we can both get that we can get these projects off the ground, I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the point is that I don't want any restrictions anymore
Yeah.
in the music that I would want to make, and I don't think that anybody should have.
Yeah.
I
And
think
that's been
don't
my kind of
whatever.
mentality lately too.
Yeah, like whatever you do, don't put a genre or a label behind it. Just
Like
write stuff and see what happens.
I like how that was kind of Lemmy's philosophy with Motorhead too. Is that like he always just said Motorhead, we're just a rock and roll band. Like we don't play any specific genre of rock and roll. We just play rock and roll, and that's it. And yeah, like Motorhead gets like lumped in with like thrash metal or new wave of British heavy metal or whatever. But like they really like Lemmy just played what he liked to play, and that was it. And that was just like rock and roll, you know. And I'm like more and more feeling that way too. Is that I just want to play what I think sounds good, you know, and not like be limited by a label or a genre.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way because then you can
Yeah.
use as many instruments as you want. You can be as weird as you want. You can just your idea can make as much or as little sense as possible that you feel in the moment.
Yes.
Like it's more about it's like I want to get back into this too, but I used to paint years ago.
Uh-huh.
Some of those paintings I've kept. Some of them I threw away because they bothered me after a point in time. Like there was a series of paintings that I did that they were really depressing and they bothered me and I brought them back with me when I moved to this apartment and but I had taken the other ones out that I kept, and I kept those hidden away, and whenever I looked at them, I was always really disturbed by them, and I it got to a point where I had to throw them away. So it's either in landfill or it's in someone's house right now, these three paintings, or so I have no idea what happened to them but I didn't like them anymore. The series was it was called Time, and there were three paintings. They were black and white, and each thing it was basically how like the whole point was that death comes for us all, and that time is time is precious, and that it's going to come to an end. So every painting was a different timepiece or a way of measuring time and that piece had a sinister element to it because that piece transformed into a skull somehow um, and it and just death was always manifesting through this timepiece like One was an hourglass, or it was two skulls looking at each other, but they were forming an hourglass. So depending on what you looked at, you would see one or the other.
Right.
Another was a clock, and the clock itself was, if you looked back, like if you stepped away from the clock, you would see that the clock is actually a skull, um, with markings on it rather than the clock face.
Right.
And then um, I think the other one was a sundial, and the sundial, similar to the clock, you would see a skull, or I think the shadow. No, I think the shadow, um, that the sunlight had cast, I think
Yeah.
had become a skull eventually. I can't really remember it, but I really after like after a while I didn't like it anymore, and I had to get rid of all three of them.
Yeah.
And all three of them were meant to be in. They were all meant to blend into each other.
Yeah.
And so that you would have to look at all three of them like in succession. And if you put them together, one ended where the next one began.
Yeah.
And I just was too I was just too disturbed by that, and I had to get rid of them. But they were probably my best paintings.
Yeah.
But I just didn't like them anymore. Um, I don't think I've ever shared that with anybody really, except my wife and maybe a couple of other people. Some people have my paintings. I've given
Yeah.
them paintings as like, "Hi, you're my friend. Here's a painting."
Yeah.
But yeah, that one bothered me. And yeah, that set bothered me, and I don't I no longer have it, but I still think about it, and it still bothers me thinking about it.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes I've thought about repainting that one just to have it somewhere. But anyway, I've wanted to.
You'll never capture the like original essence, though. You know.
No, no, I won't. And that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
But what I was saying was, whenever I would paint, that was the only one where I had a concept. But whenever I would paint, I never really knew what I was going to paint, and I just took a brush, and I just dipped it where in whatever felt like the appropriate thing at the time, and I just painted whatever came to mind, and I they came out really good too. I really enjoy a lot of them, the ones that I've kept. But they were all free form, and I think that was my favorite way. That's my favorite way to paint, is to
Yeah.
just do it free form. I never know what I'm going to paint. I
Yeah.
don't. There's one that I have. My favorite one that I have by my bedside is it's called Retro Cowboy, and it's a Nintendo 64 controller, but it has the appearance, but it looks like it's like modified to look like a cowboy going into a saloon, or like going into a quick draw outside.
Yeah.
So like the control, it's a Nintendo 64 controller, and it has the buttons and everything. It's clearly a controller, but it's painted to look like it has jeans on. It has a cowboy hat on top of the controller, and it's painted in a way where it looks like the sides of the controllers are hands going for the quick draw.
Yeah.
So it's a fun one, and I
Yeah.
really liked that. But yeah, I
Nice.
have just a few others that I've kept. There's like one where it's that I did for my wife, where where it's two purple penguins that are holding hands. I'm looking at it now, actually. It's just two purple penguins, and I just thought it, like, because my pet name for her is Penguin, and
Yeah.
I just never saw purple penguins, so I painted them. And I have another one just called the Shroud, where it's this weird like Lovecraftian-ish thing. It's not particularly evil. It looks it's kind of like a Lovecraftian Pokemon, I
Right.
guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah.
Um, it's not too bad. It's just kind of, yeah, I think it's kind of cute.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just have a couple of those are the three that I've kept, and I would like to paint again.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my point is that like Devo's music. all art my music is art, but all art in general, there shouldn't be any rules to
Yeah.
it. You should
Yeah.
just do whatever you feel is right, and you shouldn't pigeonhole yourself into doing anything particular. And
Yeah.
I think that's the most. I think the purest elements of of art is the way that it should be done.
Hmm.
And you and whoever you are listening out there, it doesn't matter. Like you can have you could have a different opinion on that too, and that's totally fine. But that's how I feel looking back now as to someone who previously had pigeonholed himself and
Yeah.
now finds a deeper understanding in this. And you can, you know, if you think that I've got a great, if you think that I'm on track, then, you know, let me know in our, like, send an email to us or let me know in the Discord or on our YouTube channel or whatever, any way that you'd like. Or if you think that I'm a schmuck and I don't know what I'm talking about, then you could do the same thing and just give it to me, baby. But I think that's all I've got to say about that.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on my on my prolific or stupid reflection just now?
No, I agree. I think that's the only way to actually truly do art is to do it unfettered and without any kind of like restrictions, like you have to like be able to, and that's not to say that like you should just like anything could be just like, you can't just like spit on a piece of paper and oh that's art. It's like, I
Well,
mean,
some would disagree.
I know, but like I mean in general, like you shouldn't try to restrict yourself into doing things that that other people might like. You should really do it for you. And I think that's the most authentic art comes from within. It comes from what you feel is supposed to be right. And what you feel is good. It shouldn't have to like conform to somebody else's expectations, basically.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's I think that sums up Devo, and
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that wraps up our podcast.
yeah.
So, thank you all for those in digital media device land taking a glimpse at this and really just listening to our spiel. We are not men, we are Devo. We are, and I guess you are too. But yeah, this has been Why Does This Exist? I've been Chris,
And I've been Rob.
and remember, question everything.
Good night, everybody.